This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
with Tony Brueski.
One of my favorite guests, Robin Dreeke, is with us. We are talking about the case against Kouri Richins, the mom who wrote the children's book about grief. Ironically, the allegations are she killed her husband and then wrote the book about grief. And even more ironically in this whole case is some of her actions very recently filing a civil lawsuit against the estate of her deceased husband to claim money and assets that she believes are hers as outlined in their prenuptial agreement. Obviously, prenups are normally for marriage and divorce and not necessarily accusations of you murdering your husband and then cashing it on the prenup. I believe that's probably a big no-no. The optics on all of this are horrendous. Robin, what is your take on what we've been seeing?
You know, again, my background isn't exactly on that, but yeah, which I love because I have that 30,000 foot outside in look view. Yeah. And when I took a first look at this, I said to myself, believe it or not, well, that's reasonable because literally, and it's reasonable definitely from her standpoint, because she wants the money. And since we know that she researched, how to be in a better jail, like for the rich and famous.
Yes, a luxury jails for the rich. It's exactly.
So she wants to be able to afford that, but I'm always this kind of pessimist when it comes to defense attorneys. And so I wouldn't put it past that it's probably the defense attorney's idea to do it so that the defense attorney can get paid. And also it seems reasonable to me, so it makes sense. The lawyer wants to get paid. She wants to make sure she has funds to pay for the best defense she can. And I mean, do the reversal, which I always love doing these thought experiments, so if you were accused of something or let's get rid of the accused. If you had a spouse that died and tragically lost, whether you were at the hands of it or not, wouldn't you want to feel entitled to the estate or part of the estate or something like that? So I think it's a reasonable action in a horrible situation.
I think it's a reasonable action, but I would be really hesitant to make a move like that right now. Just the optics of it, like maybe after the trial, or I don't know, but after the trial, you probably have even less chance. But now, my mind did go to the financial situation as well, because yes, she's going to have a huge bill racked up here with defense attorneys. She needs money to handle these sort of things. And maybe optics be damned. Maybe you're exactly right. The attorney was like, well, how are we going to be funding this? And that was kind of the only option. Maybe she's just kind of stuck in a hard place between making that decision now or not.
Maybe. You brought up a really great point there that you just reminded me of. So I love looking at these arcs of behavior. And when you talk about optics, this fits the arc of her behavior of having really no outside in looking of the optics of her behavior. The first major one being, let's write a book about my dead husband and how to grieve, and I'm accused of killing him. I mean, that just optic right there is just like, wow, that is just really off. And so this move fits that pattern of completely oblivious to that outside in looking optic.
And many narcissists are very much in that category. Many people with various behavioral disorders as well can be in that sort of state as well. Borderlines, I know, have a very difficult time looking and seeing anything from that perspective. It almost has to be put right there in front of them, and somebody has to go, look how this looks. And sometimes they see it, and they're like, oh, my God, I had no idea. And everybody's like, how? Or they just don't at all, just kind of depending on what's going on with that. I continue to be baffled by this woman and her choices, but I guess maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe going forward on this, just expect things to kind of go in places where we don't expect them to go in terms of her decision-making.
Yeah, I agree. Last time we talked about her, we did bring up the fact that her and Lori Daybell kind of have the same narcissistic, psychopathic lack of empathy, lack of understanding, behaviors that we see exhibited by these horrendous individuals. But we also emphasize the fact that just because someone has these behaviors doesn't mean they're a criminal genius, because we're seeing low IQ issues, low reps, or low common sense, whatever you want to call it, in both of these individuals that seem to have done things that make no sense whatsoever to you and I and an average man. Well, it's because they're combination, I think, of that narcissism, but also that combination of low intelligence, low ability to really cognate and think rationally as a human being. Because I mean, it's not like you have someone that is a career serial killer that we've seen that has this highly functional ability to really do horrendous things over long periods of time, because they have they have the reps, they have the common sense, they have the intelligence combined with this horrendous psychopathy. These individuals that we're talking about recently has that horrendous psychopathy, but a really low intelligence comparatively, I think.
And with that, would you agree that these people that kind of fit this profile, very low intelligence, but they think they are very intelligent? They think they're smarter than the rest of the room. What leads to that in people like this? Because obviously life is full of patterns and behavior and things of that nature. It can't just be that right now, finally, somebody is like, this was really dumb. I would imagine through most of life, this person has probably either had people say that to her, or it's been implied, or she's just seen the results of her actions that don't necessarily always work out so well. Probably oftentimes feeling like a victim and, oh, look at my luck, things of that nature. But does that constant churn of that sort of rejection, if you will, of their ideas and thoughts that aren't very good, does that then sometimes translate into overconfidence because they have to build themselves up internally, mentally to keep going?
You know, being a wound collector, as we've said, is a great way to build that resentment and seek retribution and do all these things. But I think your first point is really key and very apropos, I think, and that is, you know, we consume information that validates our own self-opinion. We get very tied to the identities that we place on ourselves by the surroundings we place ourselves around. And we want to have constant confirmation of our thoughts, opinions, and ideas. Robert Greene's book, The Laws of Human Nature, really articulates this. As human beings, we like our self-opinion validated. Lori Daybell did it, and we see psychopaths. I keep using that word too much. We see individuals that have this high sense of self do it repeatedly. We all do it to certain degrees, where we consume the news that we want to consume because it validates the things that we think about the world around us and our politics and our beliefs. But at this level, these people are doing exactly the same thing. It's how you reach that level of thinking that you got it all right. So what they did was, you know, both Kouri and Daybell and all these other ones, is you cycle through people until you lock onto the ones that tell you what you want to hear. And then if you keep surrounding yourself with people that tell you the things you want to hear about how awesome you are, you start believing that. And you start believing that. And if these people are off in their perceptions of the universe and the world around them and what societal norms are for where they are, this is what happens. They start believing their own legend, and the rest of the world is looking at them saying, you are just out there.
What happens, though, when there's somebody in that circle that for a long time helped enabled them to believe their own legends, eventually pushes back and says, you know, this is not a great idea. These are not so good?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I think the likelihood of someone that has been enabling someone that definitively for so long might not have the ability to do that because they're a little bit off in their own perceptions of reality themselves. But if they do have their own awareness kind of percolate to the top and kind of see things going sideways, which kind of happened in the Daybell case, where some of those people that kind of were almost cult-like that were following them said, yeah, it's a little off here. I don't quite like this, what you're doing with the people that seem to be being bumped off. Well, you set yourself up as a target. And so if you set yourself up as a target and there can be gain out of it for the other person, and I think that this kind of comes to the next case we're talking about too, and all human nature is people, believe it or not, even people like this, they're always taking actions that they will feel safe taking. And if you feel safe taking action and taking retribution against someone because you think you're better than everyone else, you think you can get away with it. Just look at the Kohberger case. He, again, just accused, but if it was him, he felt safe in taking those actions that he could get away with it. It's why all these school shootings happen, because these horrendous people feel safer attacking schools because they don't feel they can be caught, or they don't feel anyone's going to fight back. And so that's what happens, is that these people get surrounded by sycophants that just feed into their own overinflated sense of self, makes them feel safe in the actions they're going to take in retribution against others, thinking they can get away with it.
And look what happened to Kouri Richins, who did start to speak out and did start to say, yeah, I don't think you should be buying this $3 million home, or we shouldn't be doing this project, or this or that. Finally put the roadblock up, finally said they're going too far. And then he's not with us anymore. She's accused, innocent until proven guilty, but does kind of fit a pattern, though, too.
Oh, absolutely fits a pattern. Again, I think it's what great investigators in all these cases do, and what you and I do, and what the people that are into this do. And we're into it because we're trying to understand the world around us so we can feel safe and help those around us be safe. And that is, you try to discover the arc of life. Every time I see one of these cases that you and I talk about, the first thing I do is I dive in. I see, what can I find out about this person's upbringing?
Yeah.
Because when you start seeing a pattern of the upbringing, you can start seeing whether it makes sense or doesn't make sense, the behavior that we're seeing manifested today, or what they're accused of manifesting today. So if it spikes really far out of that pattern of what we saw earlier in life, and I know we'll talk about the doctor coming up soon in a few minutes, it makes you say either there was something tragically we didn't know about that they kept really hidden secret, or it didn't happen quite the way people think it did.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Brueski.
Robin Dreeke, retired FBI special agent and chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. Thank you so much for your insight. As always, very, very insightful. You can catch Robin here every day this week as we discuss this and several other cases around this same time of the podcast dropping in the morning. So don't miss that. My name is Tony Brueski. Press subscribe so you don't miss those conversations. Get an ad-free experience when you sign up through Apple Podcasts right now. Check that out. Tony Brueski, stay with us.